Hello again, Vaughn. Week
I
two of the
Harold.
campaign is over. I guess we're halfway, right about the halfway point. It was a big week, as much as last week was. I don't know where to begin with you. Why don't you start? Do you want to start with the debate? We had a radio debate on Tuesday.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing I would say off the top, Harold, is we said this was going to be a close election. And here at the halfway point, it's still a dead heat. I mean, you've got some polls that give the NDP a bit of an edge and some that give the Conservatives an edge. But even the pollsters themselves are saying this thing is still too close to call. So it makes it exciting, raises the stakes because they've gone 2 weeks and they haven't really been able to connect well enough to change the dynamic. We had the radio debate this week. And, I think I always try to think of what were the three leaders hoping to get out of it.
Right.
So, the Green leader, Sonia Furstenau, is hoping to be taken seriously and to show herself as a sensible person. And I think she pulled that off. And the other thing that was interesting is the other leaders didn't attack her. In fact, David Eby said, I agree with some of what she's saying. And it was almost an endorsement. And you realize that Furstenau is saying she hopes that nobody wins a majority. The Greens are in a bargaining position to hold the balance of power. And the other two leaders are going, she may be right. We better be nice to her, or at least not attack her. So that's that one. So then you go to what was John Rustad hoping for? I think Rustad's briefing from his own staff was very much, don't rise to the bait. Don't get put on the defensive. Don't get rattled. Just talk about your policies and what you're going to do. In other words, don't lose. And I think he did okay on that. They're saying he won the debate. I think a fairer comment would be a draw, but certainly their worst case scenario didn't play out. In fact, toward the end of the debate, Rustad sounded more confident, and I think that was partly like, God, I'm going to survive this thing, So now we go to the NDP. What was the NDP's goal? Well, I think, you look at what David Eby did. He kept trying to put Rustad on the defensive. He talked almost as much about some of the things Rustad and the Conservatives had said in the past as NDP policy. And I don't think he succeeded. I don't think he managed to really throw Rustad off or put him on the defensive or defeat him. So I don't think Eby got very much out of that debate. Now, we got a TV debate coming next week, so we'll see.
Right. Well, that was effectively the warm-up, I guess, for the TV debate. How do you think they might change their messaging or change their approach to the TV debate based on how they performed on Tuesday?
Well, I think there's a lot of pressure on the New Democrats to change their approach. I'm hearing from New Democrats. They haven't really been able to budge the numbers. They're still in a dead heat with a political party that didn't even exist when David Eby took over as leader 2 years ago. So I think coming within the NDP, there's a view that the party really needs to change its strategy, and Eby needs to change his strategy. This strategy of digging up old comments that, Eby or that Rustad or some conservative made on social media a year or two ago, it doesn't seem to have budged the voters. It doesn't seem to have even impressed them. It makes NDP voters happy, but they were already going to vote NDP. So you're going, can you move that dead heat and start leading decisively? And I don't think that's happened. So I think looking to see if Eby's strategy is any different. We didn't see it with the NDP platform that we got Thursday. There are more references in it to John Rustad than there are to David Eby. Twice as many. It's still the NDP running an attack campaign against Rustad without really promoting, their own record and accomplishments. So now, for the Conservatives and for Rustad, there's also a big challenge. The number that is most reassuring to the New Democrats in the polls, and the one that ought to concern the Conservatives, is who would make the best premier. Yeah. That isn't the only thing that determines vote. But you look at a David Eby, he is premier. So you of course can see him as premier. But he's got a significant lead over John Rustad.
A double-digit lead, more than a double-digit lead on him. And it's been that way for forever, right?
Yeah, Rustad's catching up a bit in some of the polls on that question. But so this is a guy who's still largely unknown. Yes, he's been in politics in the province for 20 years, but he doesn't have a high profile. So you're getting people, they're liking Conservative, maybe because of Pierre Poilievre, maybe because of federal, maybe because they want change, but they're not yet looking at Rustad as a potential premier. So I think they need to think fairly seriously, the Conservatives, in the presentation next week of Rustad. It's not enough to stick to the message and not rise to the debate. I think you have to show some leadership qualities. And, he's never going to be as dynamic as a speaker on his feet, articulate, I don't think, as David Eby. But you've got to at least find that I'm a premier thing and communicate it to the viewers. So I think that's the big challenge for the Conservatives next week. I don't know how they'll handle it. It was one thing to not lose on the radio, but you got to win or at least make up some ground on the leadership question, the who can be premier question, with Eby next week.
Was there anything? When are we going to see a full platform from the Conservatives? So we've seen it now from the Greens and the NDP.
Yeah, what Rustad said on Thursday was he is going to roll out individual policy announcements, and we've had some major ones. Yeah. But the entire platform, including a stab at costing it, saying how much some of this stuff's going to cost. That will be coming. I think they will release it next week. They better. They've only got 2 weeks left. I don't know if they'll release it before the debate or afterward. Maybe afterward, give Eby a little less to shoot at.
So in your decades of experience, I don't know, maybe this is common, but I'm certainly struck by the number of announcements from both parties that are not costed or timelined at all. When you look at some of the transportation announcements, for example.
Well, yes, absolutely. The transportation announcements, which are major capital projects, and they're not costed. And we know that those projects are all running over budget. And we don't even know when construction will start, because some of the projects that are being built right now aren't going to be ready for years. There's a little more costing. There's exact costing from the Greens and the NDP on the program spending in their platforms. But again, look, back in the 1990s and even into the next decade, political parties were pretty careful about fully costing and not projecting major deficits. They all had a plan to balance the budget, and they all were going to show how at least they would balance the budget and pay for everything over 4 years. We've moved away from that, we've moved away from it. Bill Clinton balanced budgets. No American president since then has managed it. Jean Chrétien balanced budgets and ran surpluses. Justin Trudeau is just deficit after deficit. John Horgan here in BC balanced most of his budgets when he was premier. David Eby has not done that. So I don't know. I think one of the reasons why Rustad has been announcing spending is partly because he's accused of planning to cut spending. And so I think he doesn't want to venture into that area where he suggests he'll cut spending, because he hasn't said he would. He's increasing spending. And when you ask him about balancing the budget, he says, well, it may take a couple of terms to do that.
Right.
When you ask Eby, he said this week, yeah, I think, I believe you're going to have to balance the budget, and we will. But first, he's got $3 billion more spending announcements in Thursday's platform. So before he gets around to balancing the budget, he's got a $9 billion deficit, and he's going to increase spending by $3 billion more over the next 2 years. So the times have changed.
And of course, David Eby, as you say, announced his platform this week, and he did that in Surrey, which I take it was a strategic choice of for him.
Oh, sure. Surrey, first of all, 10, 11 seats in the legislature? It's growing, and it's a real battleground. I heard from a New Democrat this week who said, there are people in his party who are acting as if they're going to keep all the seats they won in 2020. He still thinks they're going to win the election, but he said, we're going to lose seats. There are seats that we won in 2020 in a very unusual election. But we're into an election that's much more like 2017, where, most BC elections are close, right? They're not, Horgan won big in 2020, but that was a very unusual election. It was in the middle of the pandemic. The BC Liberals were very poorly led. And I think people went, I don't want to change government in the middle of a pandemic, right? That just wasn't on. This election certainly is going to be closer. I think, when we're putting together how we're going to cover election night, the good news is Elections BC say they think they'll have the numbers to us within an hour. The new electronic counting system, right? Now, they also say, there may be rural ridings where we can't do that. And of course, if it's close, they may not be able to do it either. But in any event, the big challenge for us is going to be where do we staff? Because there's a whole bunch of seats that could be, probably will be in play that looked like easy wins for the NDP last time.
And we heard a bit weeks ago about when some of the BC United candidates decided to run as independents. Are they on the radar anywhere? Are you getting a sense of that? Yeah, hard to tell. Hey,
so, there's no precedent for this, really. There's been one person elected as an independent twice in modern times. That's Vicky Huntington, Delta South. I think the independents are a factor in some ridings. I don't know, though, as though they will win. A good example is the Northeast. The two MLAs up there who are BC United, Mike Bernier and Dan Davies, are well-known and well-liked up there. And they won easily last time. So they're running as independents, and they're getting a sympathy vote and all that. And they're saying, send us down to Victoria and we'll keep the government honest and all that. But Northeast BC is an area that is so reliably small c conservative. Given the chance to be part of electing a conservative government, are those folks up there going to go, well, I like you, Dan, I like you, Mike, but this is my big chance to be part of a conservative government? And the fight is going to be between those two counts. Nobody thinks the NDP is going to win those ridings on a vote split. So I think we just don't know. Now, the parties may know, because the parties, as you know, do more detailed polling in ridings. But again, I think the parties with their limited resources are probably going to do most of their polling in and around Metro Vancouver, because that's the big battleground. They're going to want to know what's going on in every single seat in Surrey. They're going to want to know what's going on in those seats in Richmond. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's great, Vaughn. So when we talk next week, we'll have the TV debate in our rearview mirror. We can talk about that and whatever else happens between now and then. So thanks again.
More polling and a week to go.
Polling.
Exciting. Exactly. And we didn't even get to talk about the promise to bring back plastic straws, Harold. I'm disappointed.
Well, let's see how that one goes over the next week. We can come back to it next week. Thanks, Vaughn.
Okay, thanks, Harold.